So welcome back to another edition of the Heart to Heart podcast. And my guest today is Len May. So Len is the CEO and co-founder of Endo DNA. He's also the host of the podcast Everything is Personal and the author of the book Making Cannabis Personal. So Len, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. I'm a little under the weather, so if my voice sounds weird, that's probably what it is. And I've no idea if it's probably not COVID, but who the hell knows these days, because I don't really trust a lot of those tests anyway, but I think I'm fine. It's fine.
Well, glad to hear that despite feeling under the weather, you're still able to do the podcast and come on today. Super.
I'm a professional. I'm professional, so I got it. The intro was when you were doing my intro, we were talking before that. I was just going to tell the story, but I was on this. I'm going to name drop a little bit not because I'm trying to big time, but just because it's to give a visual for the audience. So
name drop.
I was at Jim Belushi's house, and Jim Belushi had a bunch of athletes on. And me, like, we were talking about cannabis. There was a stage, and then he performed a little bit, and then this guy was introducing everybody. So they had a football player and a hockey player and an MMA fighter, Frank Shamrock. So I can name,
Very cool.
Like Evan Britton, Riley Cote, Al Harrington, all these guys. So the guy who's introducing everybody, Jim McAlpine, who's a friend of mine now, he goes through and he's like, former NHL player, former NBA player, former, this, and he gets to me and he starts trying to introduce me, and he's like, sciencey guy. And then and then somebody from the audience sent me a box of t-shirts, #sciencey guy. So I'm sciencey guy, not a scientist, but a sciencey guy.
Sciencey guy, man. That's not a bad handle at all. I kind of like it. And those guys are awesome. And Evan's been on here. Riley's been on here. Met those guys before. I kind of regret not going to the conference in Miami, the microdosing concert.
Oh yeah.
All those guys and a bunch of other friends that I don't really get to see very often were there. I don't know if you knew much about that or
there was the Mydelic conference also in Vegas, and then so we hung out there for a while, and then MJ Biz also, they had Athletes for Care, had a whole house, so we got to spend some time there and have an infused meal, so it was pretty cool.
That's how I know all like most of those guys, because I'm the medical director for Athletes for Care, but unfortunately because of COVID and stuff, we just haven't been able to put on too many events and connect too much,
Yeah, Toronto's a pain in the ass too, because I was just there, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and you have to take all these different precautions and COVID tests, and you have to sign your name and your life away every single time you go to a restaurant, like they would track you. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, like we had a doctor on here recently, Dr. Ira Price, has actually been on a couple times, and
Ira's a friend, by the way.
Is he? Okay, cool, awesome. Well, kind of makes sense, like-minded people kind of tend to find each other. But when Ira, he was in New York, maybe it was a month ago or something like that, and he said that people weren't really like asking too much for passports and stuff, which we were surprised about, because we thought like New York seems to be one of the more like stricter states, and I think it is like way more strict, say, compared to somewhere like Texas or Florida, but at the same time, like people, like I was saying, like it's still nothing compared to like Canada. Like people in Canada say they're just so kind of like eager and almost like proud to show the vaccine passports, whereas like in the States, I guess people are not asking for them very much. Is that right?
Yeah, it depends on where, like as you said, different states. So I was just in San Diego at a conference, and like the signs say wear masks. Nobody was wearing masks anywhere. Nobody asked me to see my vaccine anywhere I went, but in LA they do. So in different parts of LA, if you go to West Hollywood, they will not let you in. And now there's an ordinance to let you in. You have to have your vax card. But before the ordinance, West Hollywood wouldn't let you come in unless you had a vax card.
Very, very interesting. Well, I know we only have an hour, and I definitely want to talk to you about your company, Endo DNA. So I guess I'll get into that with you. So when did you co-found this company, Len?
We started in 2017. But I've been in the genetic space. Like prior to that, I've been in cannabis for, on and off most of my life. Prior to like being a kid and being diagnosed with ADD, I'm put on all kinds of prescription medication, and I was able to find cannabis to be sort of my medicine. I had no idea that it would be medicine for anybody else. I just thought, man, that makes the windows that are open in my brain, it slows them down. It makes me focus. So I was like, okay, well, it works for me, but I really didn't tell anybody because we would consume, just with friends, but I never said to anybody that it's actually creating an experience for me. And then I was the president of the Cannabis Action Network. So we had a rally back in 1993. I'm from Philadelphia originally, Independence Hall in Philly. And I had a keynote speaker, this woman named Elvie Masika, who's one of the first people to get medically prescribed, NIH, USDA cannabis. So she lit up a joint, and I was like, wow, man, this is pretty cool. It's federal land. They're not doing anything. She's got a sticker on her cannabis. I guess it's legal, and we're close. This was 93. So it's been a while, but the experience was when everybody stayed in my house afterwards, I got woken up to a loud noise in the morning. And I was dating this girl. She was an artist. She made the sculpture in my house, and Elvie happened to walk in and break the sculpture. And she has degenerative glaucoma. She can't see. So she didn't see that it was there. And I witnessed her consuming cannabis. She still wore like pretty thick glasses, but she could see again. And I was like, wow, wait, it works for you in this way. This is really your medicine. So it sort of connected me to that. And, on and off. And my, the girl I met another girl who became my wife. And she's like, at some point you have to get a real job. So I went to work for like Price Waterhouse and, wear a suit and tie every day. And I know it's hard to believe, but I used to have long hair. So I put that in a ponytail, take my earrings out, all that stuff. But then moved to LA, and I got into the dispensary space. So I was an owner and operator and partner in 5 dispensaries in a cultivation facility. And I would start, like, one of the people who worked there, he wanted to consume some cannabis. And he's like, hey, I want to smoke. What do you have? I'm like, and at that point, I really didn't know a lot about, like, I knew indica sativa, I knew terpenes, but not to the extent now. And I was like, oh, we have a sativa dominant hybrid. He goes, no. That shit puts me to sleep. I was like, no. I said sativa. He goes, yeah. I said, no, it's indica couch. That's all I know. It's sativa's up, indica's down. And he goes, not for me. So that started sort of my thinking of like, interesting. Well, it works differently for you. And I started seeing 2 people with the same symptomatic conditions that would come in and they would consume the same cultivar and have a different experience. So I started being obsessed and trying to figure out why this happened. I always thought it was the plant, the names of these strains or chemovars or cultivars. And I came across a video by a guy named Kevin Mckernan, who was the chief.
Kevin was on the podcast pretty recently. Yeah.
So Kevin was my mentor in this space. So he was the chief science officer of medicinal genomics at that point. And I came across a video. Long story short, I started working with Kevin at Medicinal Genomics as a consultant. I would travel around the US and, Canada here and there. I would get plant material from different cannabis plants, bring it back to my lab, extract the DNA, and send it to Boston or, to a sequencer. And we started the first library of cannabinoids called Cannapedia. And that was sort of my entryway into the plant side. And the parent company that owned the Medicinal Genomics was a company called Cortigen Life Sciences. And they were a pharmacogenomics company. So we were sequencing humans for different diseases, cancer, epilepsy, autism, etc. So the thought process was we had all these human genes and we have all these plant genes. What can we do to bring that together? And at that point, they really didn't have an interest in it. They shut down Cortigen and wanted to focus on the plant. So it gave me an opportunity to bring some smart people along with me and launch Endo in 2017.
It's amazing. Well, it sounds like you definitely went through kind of like all the steps to bring you to Endo in 2017, right? Like you started using cannabis personally, experienced a ton of benefit, saw other people experiencing benefit, and then met what sounds like a bunch of awesome people along the way who were able to help you and mentor you in some way to be able to get to the position that you're in now. So, with regards to, endo, DNA and cannabis. So, there's probably a lot of people listening to this now who are wondering, am I using the cannabis that's, best for me? And, most people are able to figure that out through, self-experimentation more or less, which is, and that's what I tell my patients too. Like, I say like, this is just a guide for you, but, ultimately you will have to self-experiment a little bit and figure out what is best specifically for you. Like, I can't tell every single patient the first time I meet them, or even on follow-up appointments, exactly what's working for them. I can certainly provide some help and guide them and explain to them what cannabinoids do and what terpenes do and what they do when you mix them. But it's still doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to tell them exactly how they're going to respond to the cannabis. But seems like if you do this test, then that's kind of like further telling you that yes, this strain is good for you, or this strain's not good for you, kind of thing. So what I guess does it look like, Len? Like, say if I wanted to, and I know we chat about this on your podcast, which I encourage everyone to listen to, but what would it look like, say if I wanted to get my DNA tested to figure out what cannabinoids or what cannabis would be best for me?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that the goal of our test is not for somebody to find, what's the optimal strain, name or whatever it is that's for me. The goal, when we met with the FDA, that's really what we told them. The goal of our test is to help people avoid an adverse event. So you're absolutely right that sometimes, we're giving you a blueprint, right? But so I kind of try to use the analogy of ways. You have a blueprint. You have a road over here. It says there's a traffic jam. There's an accident on here. This is a better road to take, but it doesn't guarantee there's not going to be a pothole along the way. So the feedback that we get from people, the patient-reported outcome, helps our artificial intelligence or our deep learning try to get a little bit more sort of machine learning, I guess. My business partner doesn't like when I say AI, so we talk about machine learning. That helps to create algorithms and archetypes. So the goal is, we look at right now 675,000 different SNPs. So it's single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are different genes that have a direct or indirect association with your endocannabinoid system. And the way that it works is it's a swab. It's a cheek swab. So you can purchase the test on endodna.com. You can purchase it at physicians' offices, different places around the world, basically. And you would swab the inside your cheek. You're registered because we're HIPAA and GDPR compliant. So if you don't register, we will know that DNA belongs to you. And then you send it over to our lab and we'll conduct a sequence. If somebody's already taken a 23andMe or an Ancestry or one of the other tests, you don't have to swab. You can just upload your raw data and you can get a report right away. Now, the way the report works is it looks at symptomatic conditions associated with why somebody would consume cannabis. So it looks at anxiety, it looks at cognitive function, it looks at mood, it looks at pain, nausea, sleep, all these different things, and it gives you your genetic predisposition and makes a suggestion on a cannabinoid and terpene profile that may be a little more aligned so you can avoid an adverse event. So for some people, an adverse event may be not a big deal. Your heart palpates a little bit faster and it's okay, it's normal. But for some people, if they have the predisposition to, stress reactivity or psychosis, or they're poor metabolizers and they would consume an edible and have a pretty intense experience. And some people have genetic predispositions to things like psychosis as well. So these are the things that we're trying to help people avoid so they can have a much more optimal experience. And it's not only focused on cannabis. We're looking at nutrient deficiencies. We're looking at vitamins. We're looking at other metabolic functions as well. We look at drug-to-drug interaction. So if somebody's taking prescription medication, we have a database of different prescription medications that have a reference that says that this may interact, in some way with your phytocannabinoids as well. And then dosing based on metabolic function. What type of metabolizer are you? So for me, I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer of CBD, but I'm intermediate metabolizer of THC. And there are specific markers associated with that. And as you know, Mike, cytochrome P450 family, they produce different enzymes and metabolize different things. CYP2C9 is one for THC. CYP2C19 is for CBD, and there's 3A4, et cetera. Not to get too sciencey, but this is—
Hey, you're the science guy. You got to be sciencey.
Yeah, so exactly. So exactly.
Ahead.
No, it's exactly what it is. So guiding people to that experience and then having the feedback lets us learn. So as we give you, for some people, it's better to consume a little bit less THC and different terpene profiles that we found more efficacious. And then we also look at products and we look at certificates of analysis from those products, and we see how closely that product matches our suggested ratio. And then what we also do is ask for patient-reported outcome through a concierge service and or a biometric measuring device. Like the one I'm wearing now, that device provides data back to us frictionlessly. So we know that there's some patient-reported outcome without you actually answering questions. We see that there is some PPG data improvements. So your heart rate variability, your oxygen levels, your sleep, all these different things, we can see if they're improving or not, and we can report that back to either a healthcare professional that they're working with, or back to the actual user to see how efficacious that is, and that starts helping us create archetypes.
That's awesome. So that's amazing though. It goes way beyond cannabis, and you said a lot there. So I have definitely a few comments. So coming back to the cannabis part, a lot of people understand and appreciate the fact that if you are susceptible to psychosis or to schizophrenia, then high THC cannabis can in fact be detrimental for you, right? Whereas CBD, I've at least seen a couple studies that actually shows that it may actually have antipsychotic effects, which is incredible. So, it's important to be specific when we're talking about, psychosis and cannabis, that we're talking about high THC. So roughly though, Len, like how many people do have the gene that show up for mental illness or psychosis where you feel that, okay, based upon this test, I think that you should, stay away from THC completely, or at least stick to, 1-to-1 strains or below?
Yeah, so it depends on your genealogy as well. On the average, about 43% of people carry the gene, a homozygous gene for fatty acid amide hydrolase, which Fa breaks down an andamide, and that's a pretty good indicator if you may have some stress reactivity to THC. But also there's another gene called AKT1 that's associated with psychosis. And the perfect storm, so people of East Asian descent, for instance, it's much more prevalent than people of European descent. So you can see on our site that it's genealogy specific, but on the average, it's about 43% of the people. Now, you may have never experienced this, and it's okay. It could be a dormant gene, but just because you have this predisposition, it can help you avoid sharp corners. So for me, I don't have this predisposition. So when I did my first dab hit, for instance, it was a very intense experience, but I can imagine if somebody had a predisposition to stress reactivity, PTSD, slow rate of fear extinction, or, psychosis, as you mentioned, it can be a very intense experience. And we've had, Grandma Mary, if somebody's young enough and they're just, consuming cannabis and they don't have a specific condition, it's good that they can dial it in themselves. I completely agree with you. But if somebody has a condition where they're consuming cannabis for a specific illness or a specific medical condition, they may want to have, an optimal experience. And we had this happen before where somebody came in and they had an edible and they were a poor metabolizer, and it was a perfect storm. Homozygous on Fa, AKT1, and they had a psychotic episode. So not only did they say, I'm not touching devil's lettuce ever again, but they went around and told everybody else, hey, this is bullshit. Don't consume this stuff. So it's our responsibility to be able to educate people that it really is a personalized experience. Yes, it's safe. It's safer than anything else, but it doesn't mean that you can't have a pretty intense experience. And for some people, it may be their first and last experience, and that's what we want to avoid.
So, like, a lot of the research indicates that, about 1% of people or so, are predisposed to schizophrenia or will develop, schizophrenia or schizophrenia-like symptoms in their lifetime. That seems to be a pretty accurate number as far as my research goes. But you had mentioned like 43% of people had are homozygous for the FAAH enzyme.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
so why is that ratio, like how can you explain 1% versus 43%? Like, is the 1% someone, say, who's homozygous for FAAH and then also has I think you said the ACT1 gene, was that right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So would you say then that that's probably accurate? About 1% of people have both of those things?
Yeah, it's very rare to have both of those
Yeah.
things. And also it can be triggered through, poor metabolic function as well. So method of consumption with those two genes, it's actually a combination of several different genes. It's FA, it's AKT1, and then also UCNR1 genotype as well. So if you're looking at, here's the way I like to explain it, and deferring to you being a doctor, I'm not a doctor, just a sciencey guy, but the way that we've talked to people, we have a concierge service that actually talks to people, and the feedback is this. So if you have a homozygous allele in FA, what happens to some people is they're prone to slower rate of fear extinction and the stress reactivity. So over time, they have a lot of neurochemicals that are pumped into their bloodstream during a stressful event. And when you have adrenaline, you have norepinephrine, you have cortisol that's pumped through your bloodstream. And when we realize there's no lion chasing in the jungle, we then secrete anandamide, one of those chemicals, among others. But if you're breaking down more anandamide and you're not releasing as much anandamide as the average population, some of those neurochemicals tend to stay in your bloodstream longer, like cortisol. And what research has shown that over time, it can actually lower your pH level, make you more acidic. So people have some inflammation and pain from that. And if you have a predisposition to gut health issues, it can start moving into your gut as well, like IBD, et cetera. So by consuming, and you're absolutely right, CBD works as an antagonist. We're doing a study at Harvard Medical right now, looking at anxiety and pain, the correlation between the two. And FA seems to be a pretty good indicator of that, where you have some predispositions to anxiety, which then relate to inflammation and pain, specifically in your joints. So you're absolutely right, is the combination of several of these markers that is very rare, but FA by itself is pretty prevalent in general populations.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, 43%, I mean, that's almost half the people. So, half the people, they may not, say, be predisposed to schizophrenia,
right,
or predisposed to even, having a poor reaction to, or a schizophrenic type of reaction to high THC, but they may just have like a poor experience because, there's people who do wonderful with it. There's people who obviously do, completely horrible with it and get psychotic, but, there's also people who are in between, right?
Yeah.
Like they may just get, a little bit paranoid, or they may just, not like the way that they feel, but, the next day they're back to normal and they're not psychotic type of thing. But, 43%, I mean, that's quite a few people, right? What, how many people have the AKT1 gene roughly?
Yeah, much less. I don't have the number in front of me right now, but I can tell you as I look up the report, but it's much less prevalent AKT1. I think it's also homozygous in that as well. But yeah, here, I'll grab it right now. So AKT1 homozygous, CC or homozygous, that is about 14% of general population.
Okay, lower, but still, fairly high, right? So, you can see how, a lot of people, again, when I mean a lot, I mean, definitely in the single digits of a percentile, but, there's definitely, quite a few people walking around that have both of those genes, right?
Yeah, a psychoneurotic psychosis, like, schizophrenia is super, super, super rare. And by the way, there's so many different things that can trigger schizophrenia. And that gene is really rare, but having a psychotic-like effect, so having a psychotic episode or dissociative episode has been pretty prevalent. Like I've had over the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, I probably had about 10 people who reached out to me and said they had a psychotic episode where they ended up in the hospital. I'm not trying to scare anybody with cannabis. I am a cannabis consumer. I'm a daily user. I'm a huge activist. I think it's one of the most effective substances you can possibly consume for different things, but it really is a personal experience. And most of those people had that experience because they had the perfect storm. They're poor metabolizers and they consumed edibles, which, you know, you already have an 11 oxyhydroxide conversion, but that trigger, like I want people to understand one thing. If they can take away one single thing from this, is your genes are your predispositions. It's only your blueprint. You have to understand by knowing this, it's sort of on off switches. And by understanding what switches you can turn on and off, you can actually help to regulate those things. So if you know this about yourself, you're a poor metabolizer, you're having an experience and you had some stress that happens in your life, you're more likely to turn that on than versus me. So if I had this predisposition, I probably would have avoided my dab hit the first time I took that, or my, 50 milligram edible, which affected me, pretty intensely, but I don't have that genotype that was triggered to have me have that sort of adverse experience.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's really good information to know. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about was, you said with the FAH gene, you can be slow to the rate of fear extinction. And that's really interesting to me. And the reason why is because, and you're probably familiar with this study as well, Len, it was done on mice, not on humans, but they did have, is a study on PubMed. I've quoted it several times. I've talked about it at presentations. I posted about it. And what it does is it shows that CBD helps learned fear. And when you think about, anxiety or PTSD, and this is what I say to my patients all the time. So, the ones who are listening are probably going to be laughing at me, but, like no one is born afraid to go to the grocery store or go to the mall or go to a movie, go to a restaurant, a busy bar, concert, whatever it is. But, through trauma and through life experiences, we accumulate these things and then we become very apprehensive or fearful about, certain events that we kind of created, that we learn to be fearful of.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why CBD can be so effective for patients who have PTSD and anxiety, is because it can actually reduce learned fear. And it does it in 3 different ways, which is pretty incredible. So, that being said, so my question becomes, so if someone then has, a slow rate of fear extinction because of this FAH gene, would CBD in fact be very helpful for those people?
Yeah, absolutely. CBD. So our suggestion is a ratio of higher CBD to THC, like somewhere from a 20-to-1 to 4-to-1, but also terpene profiles. Like linalool has been shown in studies. And by the way, you brought up a great point. I probably forgot to mention it. Every single report has peer-reviewed references, PubMed or equivalent to. So that study that you mentioned is the reference study that we have among other studies. So every single report has to have peer-reviewed references on there. And then we're adding our own as we do our own studies. But you're absolutely right. PTSD. So let me just give an example, because this is like a real life example of somebody. And yes, CBD, absolutely. And linalool, like I said, linalool has shown in studies to help to reduce the anxiety that may be provoked by THC. So having the right terpene profile and having, CBD work as an antagonist of THC, that is a much more effective ratio for some people who want the relief for whatever they're using it for, and avoid the expression of the genetic predisposition to having that adverse event. But I talk about this all the time, where if you and I at a party and we're smoking a joint, like, so both of us, there'll be a vasodilation, right? So our heart will pump faster, blood vessels will expand. It's normal. But one of us can have a intense experience. This happened to me. Somebody was consuming cannabis at a Halloween party and they started having a panic attack. they started having panic. And, and this is exactly the thing that I was trying to convey to them. So now that they have a predisposition to FAH, as you said, fatty acid amide hydrolase, now they're experiencing that extra sense of anxiety and panic. But because they also have a slow rate of fear extinction, now they're also remembering, should this happen to me 3 years ago? I remember. So now all that flood of what happened to me back then comes in the moment. And I saw this firsthand. And then the second thing is, it can bring up some other memory that's stored in your subconscious, like, when you got hit by a car on your bike when you were 9 years old. So all that can be a pretty intense experience for somebody. And CBD can actually work as a good antagonist for that. And it has to do with the amount of THC and the terpene profiles that somebody's consuming in the moment that trigger that expression.
Excellent. Yeah, I got to say that for a lot of my patients, when they don't respond that well to CBD, I'm not saying everyone, but when they don't respond that well to CBD, sometimes adding in just a little bit of THC, saying like a 4-to-1 or a 2-to-1 ratio, can just make all the world of difference. And I'm wondering, what would, if you can kind of make a stab at it, it's probably difficult to, but like, what would that person's, genetic makeup potentially look like? Because I hear all the time that some people say that, the combination of the two is really what provides them with the most relief.
I completely agree with that. And what we see, it's what I just mentioned, and since we keep talking about FA, it's that ratio of having a higher CBD to some THC with the right terpene profile. That seems to be what's most efficacious. Now, for some people, 1-to-1 may be a little bit too much, but when they consume a 4-to-1 CBD to THC, linalool, and even like beta-caryophyllene that has affinity for CB2, it actually helps to reduce inflammation and helps them feel better. That's the feedback that we're getting, from people who are using, our test and the phytocannabinoid ratio. But yeah, I think you're right on.
And then with regards to like, you said that, and I didn't even know this, Len, so I'm so happy that we're chatting about it. It's like, I didn't know that your test expanded way, way beyond, cannabis. And I like how, you said at the beginning of the show that it's not so much that, we're telling you like, this is going to be the perfect strain for you that's going to, induce euphoria and not cause you any anxiety, give you energy. We're just looking for, what's going to potentially cause an adverse effect. Right. So in addition to the things that you just mentioned, are there any other genes that people should know about, say maybe not related to it? I mean, if there are other related to mental illness, please mention them. But are there any other genes that people should know about that may cause other type of ill health effects outside of mental health?
Well, you're looking at your CNR1 and CNR2 genes. So they definitely have, they're the cannabinoid receptor genes. They definitely have a lot of impact on different types of mental health challenges as well. But we're also looking at, things like gluten sensitivity, things like which is LPP gene. We're looking at sleep. Sleep is a huge one because having recovery is extremely important. And when you have predispositions to sleep, one of the things that we started noticing is bruxism is expressed in some people, which is grinding your teeth. The people that have a predisposition to anxiety, and they may actually suppress their anxiety during the day, it can come out at night with grinding your teeth. And there is a lot of genetic predispositions associated with, you have H2R2A, you have DRD2, you have genes DRD3, you have other genes that are associated with insomnia and sleep. And you want to make sure that you're getting enough recovery rest to be able to address any issues that you're experiencing during the day. Bdnf is another one that you should be aware of, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor, which I'm sure you know about. ADA is another one. So all these genes, look, the thing is, it's to empower the individual to have a better conversation with themselves and a better conversation with a healthcare professional. Because if you're doing everything you can during the day, but you're also not getting enough rest and a good quality sleep and rest, and you're consuming, high amounts of THC to be able to help you go to sleep at night, well, guess what? I mean, that receptor binding may actually create activity during sleep, and you may not be getting your theta, your really good quality restful sleep. Okay, so you slept for 8 hours, but it's the kind of sleep that you're getting. So if maybe you can consume a different formulation at night than you would during the day.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of things there that I'm very, very interested in. So I might have to have you back on again soon. I only have about 20 or 25 minutes left. So the gluten thing is something that's kind of, near and dear to me in some ways. So, I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I have a bit of eczema, and then when I started changing my diet and taking out gluten, it kind of went away. And it seems like whenever I add it back in, it definitely flares up. And I've never had the test before, but I don't think I have celiacs, but I do feel like I have a gluten sensitivity. And I have seen at least one, I think there's a couple though more, randomized controlled trials on healthy individuals who don't have celiac, who do find improvements by cutting out gluten. So my question then is like, is the test that you have, is it just for celiac, or would it tell you potentially if you have some type of like gluten's sensitivity?
It's gluten sensitivity. It's IL-2, IL-21. There are some genes that are associated with LPP, which I know I'm giving initials. I got to see what it stands for. It's a domain. It's a protein characterized by N-terminal proline-rich region of 3 C-terminal limb domains, whatever that means. But there is a study that's associated with this. So it's gluten sensitivity, that if you have a perfect storm of all these markers, there is an association with celiac. But if you have one of them, you can just have gluten sensitivity without actually being diagnosed with celiac.
Okay. All right. Very, very interesting to know. So now I want to talk to you about sleep, because I'm just like you, Len. Like I say all the time, on my Twitter, everywhere on the podcast, that I think sleep is more important than nutrition and exercise. And that's saying a lot, because I certainly take my nutrition and exercise extremely seriously. The only one that I recognize there, and I think we talked about this on your podcast a little bit, and this actually came onto my radar a few years ago when Jocko Willink was on Rogan. He was on there again recently though. That's a great podcast too.
Yeah.
But he said that he only sleeps, it's either 5.5 hours a night, something like that, because he has this DR2 gene, which is very, very interesting. So there are people out there who really only need I think 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. There's probably people who need 8 hours or maybe more a night, and there's probably people in between. So with your test, you're basically be able to like decipher which one you are. Is that correct?
You can have the guide of which genotypes are associated with sleep quality, and then with our biometric device, we look at your sleep score. So we look at different types of sleep markers to see. So I'm one of those people that only needs about 6 hours of sleep a night, and I get really good sleep. But now that I wasn't feeling well, like yesterday, I slept for 10 hours. And what it told me was that but my sleep quality wasn't good. So as I looked at I'm like, wait, I slept for 10 hours last night, but it's telling me my heart rate variability was in the red. My oxygen levels weren't good. So that quality of sleep, just because I slept long, wasn't a good quality of sleep. So I have genetic predispositions to allow me to sleep less, but it's that quality of sleep. So yes, DRD2, DRD3, MEIS1, these are all sleep-associated genes, but also what you do during the day can actually come out of how you're going to experience sleep, the quality of sleep at night. So I completely agree with you that, there's a lot of people that talk about, I only need 4 or 5 hours of sleep and I'm good. That's great. they may be running on fumes, and there's a lot of experts in sleep and say, well, you need that 8 hours, you need that 8 hours. And I'm saying, well, if I can get my really good quality of sleep in 6, that's all I need. And now we're getting feedback to show us that really is the case for some people. So looking at your genetic predispositions, looking at your sleep markers will give you an indication which bucket you sort of fall into. If you're that person that has the genetic predispositions, and then you're also measuring that through a biometric device, now you can see what it really is through our sleep lab. And that's a study we're also conducting at Harvard.
Very, very interesting. Still a couple more points. There was, as you went on a rant there a minute ago, we mentioned so many good things. Not a rant, just a really good discussion point. So the BDNF, so brain-derived naturopathic factor. So,
Yeah.
That gets elevated through exercise, I know, is one key way. And I remember, Tim Ferriss, who I'm sure you're familiar with,
Yep.
who also has an excellent podcast, indicated in one of his books, maybe it was the Tools of Titans book, one of them anyway, he indicated that you really don't need to exercise actually that much to raise your BDNF. Like, I think that the returns get fairly diminished the longer you go. And now that's not to say that there aren't tremendous benefits for maximizing your cardiovascular system, but in terms of BDNF, like he was saying, like he does like 5,000 meters or something like that on his rower, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not, and that'll like crank his BDNF. But maybe you can tell people a little bit about BDNF and how you guys measure it with your with Endo DNA.
Yeah, we do not measure BDNF. We give you the genetic predisposition, what your genotype is associated with BDNF as a marker. So we give you the gene, BDNF, and then we give you what the RSID is, location, where it is in the chromosome, and then we give you your genotype. And then by doing that, we can give you that your polymorphism indicates cognitive performance may be impaired, or you are more predisposed to sleep deprivation after cognitive performance impairment. So you can subsidize that by, as you said, doing some exercise, which will increase your BDNF level, which will actually, in studies, may help you get a better night's sleep, better quality night's sleep. So we do not measure the actual levels, but you can in the lab. And we're doing a study at CU Boulder. We're looking at blood draws, and we're looking at different levels of neurochemicals in your blood, and we're able to measure those, including endogenous endocannabinoid levels like anandamide and 2-AG as well. But being able to measure the outcome, that's an individual thing that you will probably have to get from your blood to see what the levels are.
Okay, so you guys can determine like whether or not you're someone who is going to put out a lot of high BDNF or not.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's the predisposition to that. You're absolutely right on.
And then in terms of, if you have high BDNF, I guess in that sense, like you wouldn't really take any action per se because you want your BDNF to be high. Is that correct?
Here's the way I would describe it. There is a distinct correlation between cognitive performance and sleep impairment. So the BDNF genotype will be it's heterozygous. In studies has shown that people with this genotype have severely higher chance of cognitive performance impairment if they're not getting their good quality of sleep versus the general population.
Okay, and that's okay. So sorry. So that's if you have the gene for high BDNF or low BDNF.
It's the gene for heterozygous.
Okay.
In BDNF, not low and high.
Okay,
it's just
low and high,
it's
heterozygous.
just the genotype that you have, not the measure of how much you have.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because sleep deprivation definitely affects people cognitively. I mean, myself included. I mean,
but some people are affected more than others, and that's a genetic predisposition. For some people, the sleep deprivation doesn't affect them as much as others, and for some people, you feel really cognitively impaired if you're not getting your good quality of sleep. I mean, we all probably have some level of cognitive impairment if I'm not getting a restful sleep, but some people are more predisposed to that than others, having that brain fog. And if you know this, you can then start measuring your sleep levels based on the quality of sleep that you're getting.
Very, very interesting. And then, on that note too, we had a guy on the podcast, Dr. William Wallace. I don't think he quite was a doctor at the time. I think he got his PhD like a week later, but he's a great guy to follow on Instagram. I think he just goes by William Wallace. I'm not sure if he has a doctor title in there yet, but he puts out like a lot of good memes and stuff. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because he put out one recently on sleep deprivation and what would be helpful for it. I might just actually pull it up here now, but I think one of them was caffeine. Surprise, surprise. Everyone knows that can definitely give you a boost if you're not, feeling your best. And then, I got it pulled up here now. And then the second one was really surprisingly was creatine, which again, has been shown. I've seen in studies. I haven't done much research on creatine recently, but I have seen that it can maybe prevent Alzheimer's, which is very interesting. And then the third supplement he has here, again, if you're sleep deprived, and we're certainly not, suggesting that, you purposely get sleep deprived and do these things. But if you do have, poor night's sleep, seems to be like caffeine, creatine. The last thing was tyrosine, which is kind of interesting. So, I guess that's something to consider for someone if you, if you do have a really poor night's sleep and you want to, still perform well the next day.
Well, there's another gene associated with that. So as you were saying, I just looked up that study. There's a gene associated with it's ADA is the gene.
Okay.
And it says after sleep deprivation, you may feel less sleepy and have better cognitive performance if you have a homozygous allele in ADA. So if I'm, deducing this, then maybe that's the person that gets their 6 hours sleep, or Jocko, for instance, maybe has a genetic predisposition that allows him to perform better, even though he's getting less sleep.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's great that you guys are doing this, though. I mean, and I'm so happy that we're chatting today, because I definitely want to do your tests. I want to offer it to people. We'll definitely chat, off the air about that afterwards. Sure. But we know that medicine is so personalized, and like everyone holds these, randomized controlled trials up as the gold standard, and they certainly are the gold standard. But just because randomized controlled trials indicate something, it doesn't mean that you're going to have that same response. Right. It may indicate that that may be something that is going to give you a high probability of having a good response. But as we're discussing obviously now, medicine is just so personalized, and lifestyle medicine, I guess, which is kind of what we're chatting about now. But sleep is massive, because everyone knows someone who says that they only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night and they feel great, and you just think, oh, this person must be full of shit, because if I get less than 7, I feel like a zombie, and I really need to get 8 to feel at my peak. But we've discussed gluten as well, which also has a wide range. Again, you can have celiac, you can also have a sensitivity to it, and then you can also just be someone who maybe has an iron stomach and doesn't have any adverse reactions at all. So very, very interesting that we're discussing this today. But one thing too, just coming back to the cannabis, and I kind of mentioned meant to make a point about this at the beginning. So the CBD and the THC. So some people can be slow metabolizers to CBD, but maybe fast metabolizers to THC. Is that correct? Because you said
absolutely.
Yourself, like you're a fast metabolizer for CBD, and then you're basically average for THC. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer of CBD. So if I have to take at least double whatever the suggested dose to get any effect whatsoever, or else I'm just creating really expensive urine, peeing all that out.
Interesting. Yeah, because a lot of people do say that when they take CBD, they do feel nothing. Like, oh, I didn't really feel too much of a difference. And for some of those people, they may just need to take a higher dose. And, I know that, and I'm not saying that this is something that, is safe to do, but, I saw a report from the World Health Organization that said that, there's basically no adverse effects up to 1,500 milligrams a day, which is an insane amount of CBD. And just to give reference, I mean, I don't think I have any maybe I have a couple of patients that take more than 100 milligrams a day, but it's most people are in like the 20 to maybe 50 range. Maybe some of the heavier users are up to like 80 milligrams, but for the most part, people use significantly less CBD, and they do get fairly good results overall.
Well, I wonder if that has anything to do with Epidiolex and the Sativex studies that they started coming out with and positioning themselves. Because I know Jazz just announced they're going to be doing a study on a cancer, brain cancer, using the formulation that's very similar to Sativex. But there is a liver toxicity study that's going on right now looking at that high amount of CBD. Yeah. So yeah, maybe there's no adverse effect, but what are long-term effects of taking that much CBD on your liver, especially if you're a poor metabolizer? So those are the things that we're looking at too.
Yeah, there was a report came out, it might have been 2 or 3 years ago now. Seems like a while, that in Forbes magazine put it out, because there was a study that indicated that high amounts of CBD can in fact elevate liver enzymes. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that study was not done on humans, but it may have been. But I have seen 1 or 2 other studies where there was like 1 or 2 people in the study that did have elevated LFTs, human studies for sure. And,
the study you're referring to is definitely on mice. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and for those people, the 1 or 2 people in the study that did have elevated LFTs, I mean, they were probably super slow metabolizers of CBD. And then also too, you don't know what their liver condition was, prior to using, and maybe they were, abusing alcohol or, steroids or something, when you never know. But there definitely, is some type of link to tons of CBD and liver health. So I think that, if you are using, a massive amount of CBD, it might be good, once a year or so, just to, get your LFTs checked. So LFTs are liver function tests. So I should have mentioned that. So AST, ALT, are kind of the 2 biggies that we go by. But I think that's a really good point. But that's so interesting though, that people can be, slow or fast metabolizers of CBD, and then, fast or slow metabolizers of THC, because that would, change then the amount of and the ratio that you would use. Because, if you just use a 1-to-1 example, just because that would be the easiest, say if you're using, 1-to-1, and you're a super fast metabolizer of CBD and super slow metabolizer of THC, you might feel, pretty good at first. You may feel like you're balanced. Then maybe an hour or 2 later, all your CBD is gone, and then you just have this kind of like THC left. And at that time, you may in fact have, a poor experience if you're someone who doesn't do too well with THC.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. Knowing this up front is really helpful, but also method of consumption. I mean, if you know this about yourself, just avoid your first pass. Consume sublingually, you buckle, or we don't really suggest combustibles, but if that's the case, if you want to consume a vape or whatever that is, you can avoid that first pass and how it's going to metabolize.
Okay, and then again, I know we only have a few minutes left. One last question that pertains to cannabis that I want to ask you about was, you mentioned epilepsy at the beginning. So I've got a lot of patients, I mean probably over 100, who use CBD for their epilepsy, and both kids and adults. And I always mention that just because it seems like, for whatever reason, I think a lot of it has to do with the Sanjay Gupta documentary Weed and Charlotte's Web, that people think that CBD is only good for kids' seizures, but it's like it's also good for adult seizures too. It's just that so happened that the first super popular person to talk about it publicly was Charlotte and her family. But so do you have a test that would indicate that someone may be predisposed more to epilepsy, or do you have a test and do you have a test that would say that someone may in fact respond very well to CBD for their epilepsy?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're direct to consumer. We cannot talk about any diseases in any way. So we're only looking at symptomatic conditions. Okay. As a Q1 next year, we will be doing full genome sequencing. If a doctor orders a test, they can use it as a diagnostic test. It'll have diseases and everything else in there as well. But direct to consumer, we don't cover disease states because that would be a diagnostic test against FDA, regulations. So, but we are gathering those markers. And like I said, if a doctor orders this test, you can be a lot more comprehensive. And the way that it works with a physician is you have a parent-child relationship. So you're the physician that's ordering the test. All your patients are underneath you, and then you can view the results with your patient, go over them with them, and then make a recommendation. But we don't do that direct to consumer.
Okay, excellent. So before I get you to put out your socials and where people can find your book and your podcast and all that stuff, just sort of run through, because I'm sure there's people who are gonna want to literally order your test or get access to your test as soon as they can. So how can they get access to it? And just again, Len, if you don't mind, just go over exactly how the test is conducted.
Yeah, and we'll give a code to your audience as well that they can get a discount if you want to share that. But the way that it works now,
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that it works now is you can go to Endo DNA.com. You order the test. It comes directly to your home. It's a kit, very similar like 23andMe. You
ships
open it
to
up.
Canada.
Ships to Canada, all over
Amazing.
the world. Yeah, we're global, so we ship everywhere. We have partners, and so just so you know, technology-wise, if anybody cares, our partner on the sequencing side is Illumina. Illumina built our chip for us. They're probably the largest or the best company that does genetic sequencing equipment. Our lab partner is Eurofins, which is the largest lab in the world. They have over 800 labs in 50 different countries. So we can ship anywhere in the world, and we can conduct sequencing anywhere in the world. So you would get your kit, you would swab the inside of your cheek, you would then register it because it's fully de-identified, and you would put it back. It's already self-addressed stamped, and you would ship it over to our lab. You wait about 3 to 4 weeks, and you can get your results. You'll get an email, and when you log into your portal, it'll tell you, the sample reached your lab, the sample has been extracted, your sample is ready, and then you would go over your results in your secure portal. And if you already have a 23andMe or an Ancestry, you don't have to swab. You can just upload your raw data that you already own from your 23 or Ancestry or any other test, and you'll get your results instantaneously.
Amazing. I actually have done the 23andMe a while ago, so maybe that's how I'll do mine.
Yeah, it's a little less comprehensive because we're only as good as the SNPs a day sequence.
Yes.
So if you want the full one, you have to swab, but it'll give you instantaneous results with 30 seconds or less, and it's a good indicator.
Well, knowing me, I'll probably do both.
Yeah,
I'll
gotcha.
The results I can get right away, and then I'll probably want more extended results.
Awesome.
So it'll be worth.
I got you, brother. No worries.
Thank you so much. So Len, unfortunately, we're running out of time here now. So just tell everyone, where they can buy your book, where they can listen to your podcast, where they can find you on social media.
So on social media, I'm Len May, LenMay. Len May DNA is Instagram. Everywhere else, it's Len May, and we're Endo DNA also on all social. You can buy my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. It's called Making Cannabis Personal. I'll hold it up now. That's what it looks like.
Beauty.
And podcast is Everything is Personal, and you can hear that on anywhere, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Well, Len, man, thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much today. I took as many notes probably during this podcast as any other. I'm definitely going to follow up with you, about getting my own genes tested, and really appreciate you, putting out a promo code for people listening to this. So
Yeah,
thank you so much again for coming on, brother. And we'll definitely have to chat again soon.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.